Good morning, everyone. My name is Cedric Van Putten. I work on the dev tooling team at Expo. And today, we're gonna do a nice little demo about DOM components. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you how you can convert your web app to a native app. Now, before we're gonna go into the actual demo, let's start with the question, why? Why should you actually go from web to native? Now, we're all React Native developers here, like most of us. We're at the React Native conference. So most of you should already know this, but people use their phone way more than their desktop, of course. But there is one particular story that I want to highlight here that really shows the business side of things as well. So let me introduce to you Rosebud. Rosebud is not too long ago, Chris Bader, a co-founder and CEO of Rosebud, created a guest blog post on Expo. Now, he explained the whole process of going from a web product, launching it, seeing some pain points, and going native, and also why. Now, the app itself is a journaling app created for your mental health. It was built as a progressive web app, and they had actually moderate success right after their launch. Over 100 million words were journaled, but roughly a couple months after their launch, they kind of noticed some pain points. Now, some of them are lack of natural distribution, meaning like an app store where people search for Rosebud, but they weren't there. So people couldn't download their app, meaning they would lose out on potential customers. Now, they had a hard time re-engaging with existing customers. Since it's a journaling app, you want to create a habit of starting to journal. Now, they really couldn't do much re-engagement, like push notifications, to create that habit. And while they did grow, their growth was a little bit below expected, meaning that they had a limited runway. So within a year, the money would dry up. And on top of that, the most common feedback that they got was, I would use this if it was an app. Meaning that, well, they kind of missed out here. Now, going from web to native is kind of big, right? You have to commit to a lot of things. You have to, swap out all the DOM elements into native elements, or use something like React Strict DOM. So Chris, at first, was a bit hesitant on betting the whole future of the company on committing to that app. Luckily, he did get convinced after talking with an advisor. So they set a goal. They wanted to go into native as quickly as possible. So they already had their whole PWA, which was just a React app. The team was familiar with React. They have React-related business logic, like hooks and state management. So the whole choice of which framework to pick was pretty obviously Expo. So they went to work. And oh boy, did they make an app. So it kind of depends on where you're looking. But if I look on my phone, the app actually has a rating of a 5, like a solid 5 out of 5. On the App Store on my computer, it says 4.9. Either way, you can say it's well received. But what about the business impact? As the company would run out of money in a year, right? Well, that's also very impressive. Within 14 days, the app alone added $20,000 to their account just by selling things to their users. They also added $6,000 to their monthly recurring revenue, meaning that, they extend the runway even longer. And both of these, the 7-day user retention and the upgrade conversion doubled compared to the PWA, meaning that they had a lot more engagement with their users by using an app. Now, the full story can be found on the Expo blog. So if you want to read more about that, I highly recommend you take a read on that one. Now, this is not a unique story. This story of going from web to native is pretty common, actually, in, nowadays world. So at Expo, we thought on how can we improve their brownfielding story? How can we actually go from, or how can we empower users to go from a web to a native app? And I think we got just the right thing for that. It's called DOM components. Now, originally created by Evan Bacon and Kudo Chen from Expo, DOM components can basically help you get to your native app with minimal efforts and actually create DX. So let's try and dig in here. Now, this is going to be the fun part, because this is going to be the live demo. And I have no idea how that will go. But let me change my screen. There we go. All right, so meet my simple doodle app. I'm a visual learner, so I kind of wanted to create a note-keeping app for myself where I just draw something. I can add a title and a description, and then it will just be available to me whenever I need it back. I mean, there are a couple people in the audience who are similar. I see one over there, so nice. So the app is very simple. I have my existing doodles. I can open the drawer, meaning that I can literally just draw something here. Wow, that is not great. Well, it has to do. Then I can save it, even snuck in a little bit of AI in here, as in the image generated from teal draw is actually like, it's terrible, my bad, but it had to do. So it automatically adds the title and a description, so I can like find or search for it, and that's it. Now, as you noticed, I mean, I can try again. Maybe it's better this time. Oh. No, it's not much better. But as you notice, like, it's kind of hard to actually draw on like a MacBook or with a mouse. So I want to create a native app with this. But how do we do that? Like, if I make sure we start everything, well, let's restart everything to just be sure. Oh, wow. There we go. So, yeah, always fun if you have to reset everything, but there we go. It should load any time now. Yeah, there we go. So if I open this whole thing on my native app, oh, not this one. There we go. So if I open, wow. Live demos are interesting. You never know when they work and not, but let's try it. Let's try it through here. Well, as you can see, things crash. And it's expected, right? So if I go to the code, you can see that the teal draw component that I use is literally just a teal draw component. Like, it's not built for native. It doesn't know how to render a div. It doesn't know how to like render teal draw itself. And I mean, we can say that from all the other pages as well. Like, this is the grid that you just saw. Everything is a div. Everything is, well, a header or a P. With going from web to native, you have to think of these things, right? You have to use a component library that actually works on both, or like do what as I did, where I just create the native implementation of that. Now, this I kind of cheated on already. I mean, this I asked Cursor to generate the React Native version of this, gave this to me, and that kind of worked. Now, this is not the part that I want to focus on for this demo, because this is the simple part. Now, the more important part is I want to focus on the area where we don't have a native replacement. Like, teal draw is not really available on React Native, and I'm not even sure if it will work properly. So I'm not ready to commit like hundreds of hours of time to actually convert that to a native component. So how can we actually make this work? Well, we can enable DOM components for this. And we do it just like that. I think it's readable for everyone, right? Yeah, okay, perfect. And there we go. Now, let me just be sure, since I never trust. There we go. And then if I swap to my draw component, there we go, it actually rendered. Now, this is good. Like, I can actually do a few things here. It actually works pretty smooth, but we're not there yet, right? We we have this weird little button that does a couple of things. we probably don't have like any good interaction on native with whatever we have here. It's just a web view, or at least that's what you might think. And you're actually right, because if I open Atlas over here, we can actually see how it works. Now, we have an iOS bundle, right? And in this iOS bundle, we also have a web bundle. If I filter out the code and just go to the canvas that let me just search for it. I think it's this one, yes. So on the iOS side, we actually have our component. We render the div, we render the teal draw component, but it's not what we see over here on the right. Like, Atlas shows us how things get evaluated as a module. Now here we can see a web view. And yeah, you were right, it's actually just a web view. Now, DOM components, you might think, what's so special about web views? Well, it's not just web views. There are actually a few other cool things that gives the web view superpowers. And that's what I want to focus on here. So going back to our code, we kind of see a couple of things here, right? So we have our DOM component, the teal draw canvas, but we're actually doing a couple of things here. Now, let's just start with a very basic one. Whenever I open the app, like whenever I open the drawer, I don't want to be selecting. I actually want to be able to draw right when I open it. So we can change the property on the teal draw canvas, but we might want to reuse that same component and actually have it select an existing draw that I made. So I want to be able to control that. Now, let's just add it. So over here, I can add a new property, which is like initial tool. Since, well, I have everything ready here, there isn't like a feature in teal draw as far as I could find that does this, so I'm just gonna do it the dirty way. Whenever the teal draw component gets mounted, and we have the initial, well, I do have to pass down the prop initial tool. Let's close this one. Wow. Go away. There we go. So if we have the initial tool, we can set the editor, set current tool to the initial tool. Now, you don't see anything here because if we add the initial tool here to draw instead of select, we still don't like really see any changes here. That's because, well, I built it in a way that it kind of violates React rules, so it's not really dynamic. But if we fully reload and we open our drawer, there we go. It's actually set here. Now, this is because this is a web view that can actually accept props. And those props are passed down from the native context to the web context. So it's a little bit more than having an actual web view. Now, you can also see like this callback property in here. And that is because it also just accepts a function. Like for the properties, the only data that you can pass through from web to native and back has to be serializable, because basically that's how it works under the hood. You have to be able to grab a context from, or grab a value from a context that is in a total different engine and run it into another, meaning that you cannot pass like class instances or object instances. It has to be serializable. Now in this case that's true, but we do make an exception for functions. And to showcase that, it might be actually fun, although you can't really see it here or feel it, or like even in a simulator, it might be fun to just press, like if users select a different tool, to give the app a sort of haptic feedback. Now for that, we do need to call back from the web back to native, right? So we can add that as well. Now, teal draw has something called UI event, and that I'm gonna add here, which is just a very simple event handler that changes, well, whenever the user selects a different tool. Did my simulator crash? No, there it is. Perfect. So if we have the function like already added to teal draw, so whenever the UI event gets invoked, the tool change callback prop is invoked, which everything is looking good here. So whenever the onTool change is called, we want to do, well, I have a there we go, impact pressable. I have a pre-made function that basically does this only for iOS. But basically, we're just invoking a haptic call to the native APIs. Now, because we can't see it, I'm also going to add a log. So we're on the native side. The tool change should be good enough. Now, let's open the logs here, while we still can for React Native 76. Then reload the whole thing. So whenever I press one of these buttons, you can see that, well, we actually get an invocation. Now, this is the communication going from web to native back. So you don't have to do anything like the iframes post messages or inject JavaScript. We kind of do that for you, and in such a way that it becomes more like part of the React tree. Now, all right. So let's finish this up with like the final tweaks that we want to have to actually make this pretty nice. Now, the save doodle button over here is kind of broken. It did work on web pretty well, but not here. So let's change that. Now we can easily detect if something is running on web or on web within an app. And for that, we have to use the isDOM check. So we only want to show this button or the menu when we're not running as a DOM component, but just on web. Now, of course, I need to reload every damn time. Yeah, there we go. It's gone. Now, this allows us to like draw, to have the whole screen filled, but it doesn't allow us to export, right? For that, we want to do a little bit more. Now, since we have access to the native side of things, like the Expo router navigation, we can actually have a special button dedicated here in the top right that basically, well, allows us to do so. So let me just grab the code for that real quick over here, where we wrap everything as a stack screen. There we go. And then uncomment this. Format, and then let's see, this can be gone. We need to create that one. Add these components. There we go. And then we add the onDoodle, wow, create press function. Now, what we need to do here is whenever the button is created, wow. Oh, my bad. There we go. So now that we have our button, we do need to link it up to the TLDraw instance, right? Now, right now, it doesn't do a lot because, well, our callback handler is empty here. Now, how do we actually do this, right? Where we have to invoke something on the web context from the native context, but we only, like, we're running into a whole different set of issues here, where we can kind of use props, but that will be abusing the React, well, update hook or the update life cycles. We don't really, like, we only have callback functions that goes from web to native, but not from native to web. And for that, we can actually use another feature of DOM components that is still experimental. So use it at your own risk, but it is actually very powerful. And for that, we're going to use something. Did I have the docs here? For that, we're going to do a combination of passing refs and the imperative APIs. Now, how would that look like? In order to call something from the native to web, which usually you shouldn't for React purposes, but in our case, we actually want because TLDraw is not really React. So in here, we wanted to create a new ref, which we're going to call TLDraw ref. Use ref, well, the whole thing. We can have like add the type later. And then whenever we want to export or save the whole drawing, we can do, if we have a reference to TealDraw, we have to do something here that, well, something. Now, in order to actually implement this ref part, we have to go to the DOM component here as well. Because before React 19, we cannot really use refs without using the forward refs, which I have ready over here as well. So I'm just going to move this one up. I'm going to auto import a lot of things. Then we do want to have a type on that ref because, well, again, everything has to be serializable, right? So we cannot actually use the same instance of the component in both contexts. So what we do instead is this. We have a ref, the original ref that we have to pass through back. And in here, we can do something called use DOM imperative handle. Now, we have to reference the original ref, but in here, what we can do is we can create our own, basically, interface. So anything that I can pop in here is actually available on the native side. So in our case, we only have the export doodle, which should invoke the export doodle function. That's it. And then when we go back here, and we actually add the correct type, which is the TealDraw, this one? Yeah, there we go. We can see that we actually have the export doodle function. Now, if we were to try this, and I already see some red in the background, so let me just check it out. There we go. Is that enough? Is that it? Yeah, that is it. And I see it's fully stopped, so let me restart everything. All right, let's try it. So everything is loaded. Can create a smiley. Again, still not great, but I'm using a MacBook still. Oh, did it work? It didn't. Wait, let me double check. What did I do wrong? Oh, we do need to provide the ref here, which is TealDraw ref, and I don't want to care about the types right now. And there we go. So what this does is it basically invokes a function from native to web by using our semi-automatic bridging of functions of both contexts. It's kind of hard to explain, but basically you can put anything in here. Anything that it returns has to be serializable. Any function that you add has to have serializable props. So we can do a lot of other things, like set current tool can actually do this as well, where we accept a tool, which is just a string again, and then editor current, and then set current tool. Oh, set current. Well, you get the point, right? Like these kind of things are also valid. Oh yeah, I do not have this in the types, but you get the point. So this allows you to basically overcome the obstacles, like the last remaining obstacles that might be hard to implement if you're using a web view for things that don't have a native equivalent. Now, I mean, this is great, but there are a couple of things that are not so great about DOM components. And for that, we need to go back to our talk or our slides. So let's stop this mirroring. Let's go back here. There we go. Now, there are a couple of things that are not so great about DOM components. And the primary one is actually performance. So the performance here is that if you use this for everything, which we have tried as well within Expo, of course, use it for all your screens, all your layouts, you can get it actually working pretty well. But you do have some side effects. And one of them I actually want to show here. Well, the side effect is actually caused by something that is very close to Hermes, where in Hermes, we actually do not execute the JavaScript itself. We execute instruction code. And the instruction code is faster than actually parsing the JavaScript as you go, like loading it, executing it, and then running it. What we have in web views is not Hermes, though. So in a web view, what you will see if you use DOM components for everything is something like this. This is another test app that I created. These 2 pages are both just ShatCN. They are like fully in web, but they're running in DOM. Now, if I swap or open any of these pages, you can see a small delay, right? So there we go. So it loads, there was a white page, and then I tap the other screen, it still has a white flash. If you compare this to full React Native, which I also did, you notice the difference, right? Now, you can overcome this with like plenty of animations or fade-ins, fade-outs, but you cannot fully remove it. So don't use DOM components too much for things that are not necessary to do in web. Now, I want to close off with a couple of good examples that I found in the whole community. So DOM components have been released for some time now, right? We had it released as a canary like before React Universe, I think. And luckily for us, some of you actually were adventurous enough to try it out. So one of them is Thor. Thor created this whole guide about using DOM components to self-host your own maps using MobLibra, ProtoMaps, and Supabase. It's very niche, but it's very niche, and it's super hard to compare with Google Maps, but it's still cool that it's even possible. Now, you can see the full result over here, but everything here is not using Google Maps or Apple Maps. It's all custom with ProtoMaps and, self-hosting, which is interesting. Now, another one that I really like is this Devloop person. I'm not sure if that's his real name, but let's go for it now. He used an existing library called React Swappy that basically is a direct-to-swap library. So as you can see on the right, it's just you can move things around, you can replace them. This is incredibly hard to do in native. It is possible, but you will have to do a lot of weird things. But since the libraries are already available on web, you can just use that, try it out, or test your hypothesis if your app would work, and then commit later to actually implement it in native. And last but not least, which is also something I really enjoy, is the React Photosphere. Now, Raphael Moreau showed us how to use this library on native as well, and this is the only thing that is required. It's even way easier than using TLDraw on native, but the same idea. So to summarize, with DOM components, you can use the full ecosystem of React and React Native. It's best of both worlds combined. Then you can have an incremental migration path of going from web to native without having to commit to all the native code that you have to write up front. You can just test and try it out. Now, the best thing about this, which sets this apart from normal web views, is that it actually has your usual React DX. Although the imperative DOM APIs are slightly different, the props and callback props are actually the same thing. Now, as I said, the imperative API, I have to say that this is still experimental, and the APIs might change, but it is available and you could try it out. We'd love some feedback on that. Now, if you want to try it out right now, as in the DOM components itself, highly recommend Evan Bacon's talk on DOM components, where he converted the whole dashboard, the ShatCN dashboard, in an app that works pretty well and is very polished. I will leave this open for a bit so you can actually join test flight if it's still on, but highly recommend you try that. That's all I have for today. My name is Cedric Van Putten, and you can follow me on Blue Sky. It's the same handle, but with a dot. You can follow me on Twitter. And if you want to actually try out the app that I just showed, I can actually show it since I have it on my phone. But happy to show it as long as my cloud credits do not deplete that fast. So yeah, thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming on, Cedric. Please come in, and we're going to do a quick Q&A lightning round, all right? So while we wait for the questions to come in, and again, scan that QR code to get some questions, really cool. I love the idea of sort of incrementally finding a path to be able to leverage and use DOM within React Native apps when necessary. I guess the question that people will have, and I think you kind of touched on this, is we're going from a world of Ionic, Cordova, to React Native, and then kind of almost backtracking a little bit. What's the sort of Expo team's vision as to how this plays into the greater universal app strategy and story?
Well, I mean, that's a hard one to explain, right? Like, web is still easier than React Native. Like, React DOM is still easier than React Native. So we actually want to have a lower barrier of having to access React Native itself. And one of those barriers is, well, like having to learn everything that React Native has to offer, even though like you just want to try things out, right? Mm-hmm. You already have a web product. You just want to see how it would behave as an app. It doesn't have to be perfect. You just want to ensure or like try it out to see if your hypothesis of it working for your users will make sense. DOM components is the exact tool for that. It's like we originally created it as a migration path, but after like the initial testing, we also figured it could actually work for specific parts of your app that is extremely hard to move to native, like MDX rendering, like teal draw, like plenty of things. And for that, you can actually polish things around it so the transition is as smooth as possible. So that's the only exception to the migration part of the story. But that's pretty much it. Like we don't really encourage users to, if you have already a native app, go back to web. Like you're throwing away a lot of good things by doing so. Only uses if you go from web to native.
Yeah, cool. You touched a little bit, you said one of the trade-offs is that it has performance drawbacks. Can you maybe just elaborate briefly on what those performance drawbacks are?
Yeah, of course. So as you know, a React Native bundle isn't the smallest. Like it's usually a couple of MBs. And with Hermes using, well, instruction code, that loads pretty much instantly on a native device. Now, again, in web views, we don't have Hermes. Like we actually have the JavaScript, meaning that it's very likely that you're loading a couple of MB worth of JavaScript alone in that web view. You will notice a startup penalty for that. So that's what I mean about having some performance regression there. Mm-hmm. Again, you can work around it. You can figure out ways to make the transition smooth, make it almost as seamlessly as possible, but you can never fully remove it.
Sure. How do you debug DOM components? What's the sort of workflow right now?
Oh, I actually should have shown you. But since, like, if you're using an iOS simulator, everything is JSC, like even the web view. And that has an easy integration, which we enable by default, with the Safari debugger. So if you want to debug inside of the web view, just like a normal React Native web view, you can just open Safari, you can go to develop, and you can literally inspect right away.
Cool. I'm going to ask a few very quick lightning rounds, like yes or no. You don't need to go through them in too much detail, and people can come and ask you afterwards. Can DOM components render native components inside of them?
No.
Will it work with bare React Native projects, or is it Expo only?
No.
So Expo only, right? Cool. My instructions were not very clear. You're like an AI agent. Yeah. Are DOM components stable in Expo 52 now?
Yes, with an exception of the imperative handles.
Will DOM components support hosting an Ionic app / components in the future? I don't know what that means. Just say no.
I mean, use a normal web view for that.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. Thank you so much, Cedric, for coming along. Please give him a massive round of applause. Appreciate it.